When I try to explain to people who are not American why we focus so much on race, every time we fill out a form or do anything, they always ask about it, and we're always like put into boxes because of our race. So today we're gonna be reacting to another video by Trev in Poland called 7 Things Americans Do Differently Than Poles.
But I'd like to get started with numbers, letters, times, and dates. So on average, what I've noticed is that Polish people write their ones with just a slash and then a vertical line, which Americans will typically do the slash, vertical line, and then either a bottom horizontal line, or it'll be just the vertical line with no slashes or other marks at all. And then I also noticed with the number 7 that there's typically a line dashed through the center of it, which Americans don't do that. And then the number 9 is kind of a confusing one for me because it looks like how I would write a G, but typically it's written like a normal 9, but on the bottom there's a bit of a slash that tilts upward. So yeah, that's just one way that Polish people write their numbers.
I write my 7s with the slash there as well. Then I also write my Z's with the slash, and I've heard that that's confusing for people because in Poland, if you write that, that is also the same as the Z with the accent mark above it. So I've been trying to fix that habit.
My girlfriend and I write each other letters. She writes a bit differently than how I would. The one thing I notice about her letters is that she typically puts a lot of cursive in her handwriting. So another thing I notice is that with sales prices and things like that, they're actually written differently than how you would write them in America. So for example, if you wanted to write $1,000.50, you would put a comma after the 1, and then you would just do a decimal before 50. Poland, sometimes they use a comma to separate long numbers and things like that, but for the most part, they'll just put a gap in between the numbers. So for example, it would be like a 1 space 000 comma 50. So instead of decimals, they use commas there, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then they put zloty at the end of the number instead of dollar before the number like you see in America.
Interesting. I never thought about that actually, because I think when I see prices nowadays, I don't know if there's a space in between the 1 and the zeros like that. I thought it's just like 1,000 or 2,000 altogether. But I need to start checking for that. Please like the video if you're enjoying it and consider subscribing to the channel.
People write their dates differently. So for example, if you wanted to write August 5th, 2020, in Poland you would write 5/8/2020. And then in America, you would write 8/5/2020. So that.
But this is not just in Poland, this is almost everywhere in the world. And the Polish system makes a lot more sense actually if you think about it, like date, the month, and then the year. But then how we say it in America is like, what day is today? Today is August 30th, so that's why we write it that way. And that's actually how I say it too, and that just makes more sense in my head. So I still write things the American way, even though I can admit that the other way makes a lot more sense.
So another thing is time, and I noticed on my girlfriend's phone that she had her clock in the 24-hour setting, and I was thinking, wow, she's really obsessed with the military, she likes military time, etc., which is what we would call it here in America. And you can also say the time in 24 hours. So for example, you can say 17 o'clock or, you know, other things like that, etc., if you wanted to describe the time in Polish, or you can even say the 12-hour time if you wanted to. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Let me know in the comment section down below.
Yeah, that's true. Like if I want to meet up with my friends, we'll actually just not even say 17 o'clock. We'll just be like, what time you guys want to meet up? 17, 17:30? All right, let's do it.
For the most part, Americans just use the 12-hour format. Now, another thing is that Poland uses the metric system and the US uses the imperial system. But when it comes to science and school and things like that, you actually use, and here in America, you use the metric system. And it's just a much better system to use when it comes to science and things like that. In the UK, they use imperial mixed with metric a little bit more often into daily life. So things are just kind of complicated and all over the place and not just to one system.
Celsius being from 0 to 100 just makes so much more sense than what we have in the Fahrenheit system with the like 32 being freezing and what is it, 232 being boiling. I don't know if that's correct, but I think with the Fahrenheit system you can more accurately say what the weather is, because for the most part we only use weather from like 0 to 34 or 35 here, right? And whereas if you're like, oh, it's 72 degrees, 68 degrees, it's a little bit more precise. Yeah, I think the Celsius system makes way more sense, to be honest.
So it seems like Polish people drive a little bit more aggressively than Americans on average, but at the same time, it seems like Polish people are more aware of what's going on, and they also stick to the rules a bit more. And this is in terms of like moving over when you're in the passing lane and things like that, which I've already talked about on my channel. But another thing I noticed that Americans do differently than Polish people is turning on red lights. And yes, that's actually legal. So on the intersection, sometimes about, I would say like 20% of the times, there's a sign that says no turn on red. If you're stopped at the intersection and other traffic is moving along, if no one's moving along at that time and you see that it's good to go, it's basically a stop sign in a sense, and you can then make a right. But that's only right. You can't go left or anything like that. So the third one on my list is the size of produce. So I think over time here in America, everything has really just been genetically modified to be bigger and bigger, whether that's fruits or vegetables. And if you actually watch one of my videos where I was making pierogies, then you can see there that we didn't really know what to do because the recipe was in Polish and it called for an onion. And when we went to the grocery store here, we noticed that the size of the onions were basically like cantaloupes, and they were just massive.
The recipe calls for 1 onion, but Adriana is saying that compared to Polish standards, this is almost like 2 onions, so we don't really know what to do.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's almost like watermelon.
The produce here in Poland is actually surprisingly quite good. Not only just like a better quality, they're normal size, but this is kind of how it is everywhere in the world. Colombia was interesting because you'll see avocados literally this big, like as big as my face. You think that they're genetically modified, but it's because the crops are just so rich there. That's how it is.
The fourth one on my list is getting around, and most Americans really will only take their cars anywhere, even if that's just half a mile away or, you know, just like a kilometer away. It's really a driving culture here for the most part, but at the same time, the US is really only designed for cars. There's really a lack of sidewalks here, and I guess because of that, most Americans just simply don't walk. Whereas in Poland, I would say most Poles drive, but at the same time, there's lots of access to public transport, which is really good. Poland, the only drive-through option you had was actually at McDonald's, whereas here in the States, you can go through a drive-through and, you know, get liquor, you can go to the bank, you can go to the pharmacy. Like, there's a ton of different options of drive-throughs. I mean, it really is a driving culture here. All right, so the fifth thing on my list is dress. Now, in America, you know, most people would just wear whatever they're wearing, go to the grocery store, whether that's, you know, sweatpants, or if you're a girl, like leggings, or, you know, even athleisure wear for both genders. Now in Poland, that's completely different. Most people will really dress up even if they're just going to the grocery store. That actually like shocked me that people, you know, cared that much about what they looked like before.
I don't think that's the case anymore. I think the younger generation generally does not care as much about how they dress, because I'll walk around everywhere, like in Warsaw or here, and women are totally comfortable with being out in sweats now, at least the younger generation, right? Maybe it's different in the smaller cities where people might care a little bit more about their appearance. But from what I've seen here, a lot of people don't mind going out looking like just in sweats and stuff anymore. So kind of similar to America.
And also speaking about athleisure, I didn't really see athleisure clothes really at all in Poland. I mean, obviously besides the gym. Whereas here in America, a lot of, for example, women will wear leggings and like athletic shoes, you know, just like a regular, you know, comfy t-shirt. Like for me, I think it's pretty easy to tell when there's an American in Europe. And that's the same thing with even just like wearing a sports cap. Like most Polish people don't really wear hats at all. And if you wear a hat inside, I guess it's pretty disrespectful for old people. That's what a lot of Polish people have told me in the comments in my previous vlogs and videos. So another thing I wanted to talk about is temperature. So for example, here in America, sometimes guys, actually some of my friends do this, they'll wear a t-shirt and shorts in nearly freezing degree temperatures. Let's just say spring is coming and it's around the 50-degree temperature mark. You know, sometimes Americans will wear just shorts and a t-shirt. I've even seen Americans wear shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops just outside in nearly freezing degree temperatures, and they just don't even care. Most of the time the heating is like so hot that you just go inside a building and you start sweating anyways. So sometimes the comfortable thing to do is really just wear a t-shirt and shorts. Whereas in Poland, oh my god, I've seen people wear scarves and a coat and a hat when it's like nearly 70 degrees outside. I don't know what it is, but
sometimes I'll walk around and I'll see girls in shorts in the middle of winter right now. Like I remember, I think I was on the metro or something, and the weather right now is like 0 or -1. Sometimes you'll just see girls walking around with shorts and no tights, and I'm like, what the F? How is that even possible?
treat, you know, the cold so much differently. But yeah, this was just something.
But the cold also feels different based on everywhere that you go, right? The US is such a big place. So if you go like towards Canada, the cold there hits differently than the cold in Los Angeles where I'm from. I think it's because of like the humidity and everything. Because I remember like being in LA, it never got below freezing and it never snowed. But when it would be like 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, it still feels like -2, -3. And I remember last year I was here and it was -15. And to be honest, it was not that cold. It didn't feel that bad.
And I don't know, because to be honest, like the heating systems are so hot in Poland that every time I would go inside a restaurant or building, I would just instantly start sweating. And
That's
even if
true.
I had a
That's a good
sweater
point.
on or whatever, I would just have to take everything off. And to me, that was just kind of annoying. When you're signing a form, whether this is like for your license or you're applying to school, you know, college, or even just a job, whenever you're, for example, applying, or if you're just filling out the job paperwork after you got the job, you have to put what race you are. And you actually have to put
So
whether you're
interesting.
Hispanic or non-Hispanic. And I know this is not done.
So this is such an interesting point, and I love that he talks about this because when I try to explain to people who are not American why we focus so much on race, it's because every time we fill out a form or do anything, they always ask about it, and we're always like put into boxes because of our race. And even when I was in America, people would not see me as another American. People would see me as Asian first, or my Latin friends, they'd be Mexican first. It would always be whatever race you were first, and then being an American. But because in America we have everybody, all races that were all born in America, we have to separate each other, and it's always through the basis of race. And they use that for like a lot of census data as well, so they can compare the races between each other. This whole race thing in America goes pretty deep.
And I don't know if this is about demographics, whether the jobs or, you know, companies that you're applying for has to fill out this information, or this could be about diversity, because I know like some companies have to, you know, meet a certain
DEI,
diversity
yeah.
quota, whether that's a certain amount of races of this, a certain amount of races
Gender
of
too.
that. I've heard things like that before, and I've heard about this when even applying to colleges, that some Asians have not been able to get into school because they
Bingo.
at least
Yep.
think it's because of their race. And same thing with white people. I've heard that too. I'm not really sure if that's true, but I feel like for the most part it's really stupid, and there's really just no need for it. And why should you have to put that on the form? What does it matter anyways, right? And instead the person should simply just hire you based on
And
your
your
character
merits.
and not your
Yes.
race. I think that most Americans in general go out to eat much more often than in Poland. In Poland, I feel like most meals are really just made at home, whereas in America, a lot of people go out to eat nearly every day, whether that's for work at lunch or maybe just once a week they go out to eat. And I don't.
And that was the same for my family as well, actually. It's because both of my parents worked a lot. Every time we would go out to eat, they would usually pick something up or hire other people to cook home food for our family. When I was younger, I grew up with a Taiwanese babysitter, and she would always cook home meals for us, and I never appreciated how amazing that was until now as an adult. But yeah, it's definitely true. The restaurant culture is really, really big. I don't know how much anymore because things are so expensive now.
For example, I go out to eat nearly every single weekend, and my girlfriend will like not go out to eat for a while until she goes out to eat to like get a pizza or something like that. But I think that's pretty common on average. Like I think most Poles in general just don't really go out to eat.
I don't think it's because Polish people don't like to go out to eat. I think it's because they have a similar mentality to a lot of Asian people. We're just very frugal, right? Poles like going out to eat because of the social experience of it. But if it's way more expensive, we have pierogi at home. So we're just gonna eat at home. And that's what my parents a lot of time would say to us. I highly recommend that you guys watch this video next. What else should I react to? Let me know down below. If you're enjoying the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel.